My father threw a wrench at my head. Not metaphorically, an actual wrench, and it missed me by inches before denting the garage wall behind me. That dent is still there, and honestly, it's the most honest thing my dad ever gave me. Because what came next changed everything. He looked at me with those cold, disappointed eyes and said 5 words that would reshape my entire existence. 5 words that made me walk away from everything I knew. 5 words that led me to discover what he'd been hiding for 30 years. Today I'm telling you the story of how I lost my father, found his secrets, and built something he never thought I could. This is about broken promises, hidden talents, and why sometimes the best thing your parents can do is push you away. Stick with me because by the end of this, you'll understand why that wrench was actually a gift. Let's get into it. So let me set the scene for you. I'm 23 years old, living in my dad's house, working at his auto repair shop, and absolutely drowning in his expectations. Every single day was the same suffocating routine. Wake up at 5 in the morning, stumble into the garage that smelled like oil and disappointment, and spend 12 hours underneath cars while my dad criticized every single move I made. And I mean every move. The way I held a socket wrench was wrong. The way I diagnosed an engine problem was inefficient. The way I talked to customers was too friendly, not professional enough. Nothing I did was ever good enough for this man. But here's the thing. I actually loved cars. I loved the puzzle of figuring out what was wrong, the satisfaction of hearing an engine purr after I fixed it, the gratitude in people's eyes when I saved them hundreds of dollars. What I didn't love was my father's shadow. He'd built this shop from nothing back in the 90s, and it was his entire identity. Every bolt, every tool, every customer relationship was sacred to him, and he expected me to worship at the same altar, to sacrifice my own dreams and personality at the altar of his legacy. The tension had been building for months. I'd started staying up late at night, sketching designs for custom car modifications in my notebook. Not just repairs, but actual creative work, transforming ordinary vehicles into something special. I'd post some of my drawings on social media, and people were actually responding. Strangers were messaging me, asking if I could work on their cars, offering to pay real money for custom jobs. But my dad saw these notebooks once and literally laughed in my face. He said custom work was for spoiled rich kids and that real mechanics did honest repair work. He made me feel stupid for even dreaming bigger. That day, the day of the wrench, started like any other terrible day. We had this old 1967 Mustang in the shop, and the owner wanted some custom exhaust work. I was excited because finally, I could do something creative. I'd spent the previous night researching, designing, planning the perfect system that would give this car an incredible sound while improving performance. I came in early, started working, and I was in the zone, completely focused, completely happy for the first time in months. Then my dad walked in. He took one look at what I was doing and lost his mind, started yelling about how I was wasting time, how the customer only paid for a basic job, how I was going to ruin his reputation by doing unauthorized work. I tried to explain that the customer actually loved my ideas, that I'd called him the night before, and he was thrilled. But my dad didn't care about facts. He cared about control. He told me I was being disrespectful, that I didn't understand the business, that I was going to destroy everything he'd built. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was years of resentment finally boiling over, but I stood up and told him the truth. I told him his shop was stuck in the past, that customers were going elsewhere because he refused to evolve, that his precious reputation was already dying because he couldn't adapt to what people actually wanted. I told him I had ideas that could save this place, that could make it special again, but he was too proud and too stubborn to listen to anyone, especially his own son. His face turned this deep red color I'd never seen before. His hands were shaking, and then he grabbed that wrench off the workbench and hurled it at me. Time slowed down. I saw it spinning through the air, saw the rage in his eyes, saw my entire future in this garage flash before me. The wrench missed me, slammed into the wall, and fell to the floor with this deafening clang that echoed through the suddenly silent shop. We both stood there, frozen, staring at each other. And then he said it. Fix it or leave. Just like that. No apology for almost hitting me, no acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he'd crossed a line. Just an ultimatum. Fix it, meaning fall in line, give up my dreams, become his clone, or leave. Walk away from the shop, from the house, from the family business, from him. I didn't even pack. I walked out of that garage, got in my beat-up truck, and drove away. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. I had $300 in my bank account, no plan, nowhere to go, and absolutely no idea what I was going to do next. But you know what? For the first time in years, I could breathe. The weight that had been crushing my chest for so long suddenly lifted. I was terrified, but I was free. I ended up sleeping in my truck that first night, parked behind a fast food restaurant. I laid there in the back seat, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. My phone kept buzzing with messages from my mom, begging me to come home, to apologize, to make things right. But I knew there was no going back. My dad had drawn a line, and I'd crossed it. This was it. This was my moment to either prove him right about me being a failure, or prove him wrong by succeeding without him. The first week was brutal. I was couch surfing with friends, taking showers at the gym, eating nothing but cheap fast food, and questioning every decision I'd ever made. But I also felt this weird electricity running through me, this sense that I was finally writing my own story instead of living in someone else's. I started taking those custom job requests seriously. I posted on every social media platform I could find, offering custom automotive work at prices way below market value just to build a portfolio. My first real client was this kid named Marcus, who'd just bought a used Honda Civic and wanted it transformed into something special. He had a tiny budget, but he had vision, and more importantly, he trusted me. I worked on that car in a friend's driveway, using borrowed tools, working until 2 a.m. every night for a week. I customized the body kit, modified the suspension, tuned the engine, and added these LED accents that made the whole thing glow. When I was done, that car looked like it cost $50,000, not $5,000. Marcus posted pictures everywhere, tagged me, told his story, showed the before and after. Within 24 hours, my phone exploded. I had 50 new messages, 20 people wanting consultations, and my social media following jumped from 200 to 5,000 overnight. I realized something huge. People didn't just want their cars fixed, they wanted them transformed. They wanted personality, creativity, art. They wanted exactly what my father said was worthless. I found this abandoned garage on the edge of town. The place was a disaster, full of junk, with a roof that leaked and electrical wiring from the Stone Age. But the rent was cheap, and the owner was desperate. I negotiated a deal where I'd fix up the property in exchange for lower rent, and suddenly I had a workspace. I spent 2 weeks cleaning, repairing, painting, turning this wreck into something functional. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. The work started pouring in. I was doing 10-hour days, then 12-hour days, then basically living in the garage. But unlike working for my dad, I loved every second of it. Each car was a canvas. Each customer was a collaboration. I wasn't just following orders, I was creating. One guy wanted his truck to look like it came from a post-apocalyptic movie. Done. A woman wanted her Volkswagen Bug to be covered in hand-painted flowers. Challenge accepted. A doctor wanted his luxury sedan to have a secret compartment for camping gear. I made it happen. Word spread fast in the car community. People started driving from other states to work with me. I got featured on a few automotive blogs, then a YouTube channel. Then suddenly, I was getting interview requests from magazines. 6 months after walking out of my dad's garage, I had a waiting list 3 months long. I'd hired 2 employees, and I was making more money than I'd ever imagined possible. The kid my father said would never amount to anything was building something real, but success felt weird without resolution. I hadn't spoken to my dad in all this time. My mom would call occasionally, giving me updates. She said he never talked about me, never asked about me, just worked in his shop like nothing had changed. Part of me wanted to call him, to show him what I'd built, to prove I wasn't a failure. But another part of me was still angry, still hurt by that wrench, still wounded by years of criticism and control. Then one night, I got a call that changed everything. My mom's voice was shaking. My dad had collapsed in the garage. Heart attack. He was in the hospital, stable, but serious. She begged me to come. I drove to that hospital with my heart pounding, not knowing what I'd say, not knowing if he'd even want to see me. When I walked into his room, he looked so small in that hospital bed. This man who'd always seemed larger than life, invincible, was suddenly fragile and old. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something softer. He tried to talk, but his voice was weak. He said my mom had been showing him my social media, the articles about my business, the pictures of my work. He'd been watching me succeed from a distance, too proud to reach out, too stubborn to admit he was wrong. And then he said 3 words I never expected to hear. You were right. That broke something in me, all the anger, all the resentment. It just crumbled. We talked for hours that day. Really talked, maybe for the first time in my life. He told me about his own father, who'd been even harder on him, who'd never believed in his dreams either. He explained that when he built his shop, he thought he was creating something better, something his son could inherit and be proud of. But somewhere along the way, pride turned into control, and love turned into pressure. He was so terrified of me failing that he'd suffocated me, and he finally understood that. Recovery was slow for my dad, but something had shifted between us. He started visiting my garage, not to criticize, but to observe. He'd watch me work with this curious expression, like he was seeing me for the first time. Sometimes he'd offer suggestions, but gently, respectfully, as a colleague rather than a dictator. And honestly, some of his old-school knowledge was incredibly valuable. He knew techniques I'd never learned, had wisdom about running a business that only came from decades of experience. One afternoon, he pulled me aside and made a proposal. His shop was struggling, customers were leaving, revenue was down, and he admitted he didn't have the energy or vision to save it anymore. He asked if I'd consider merging our businesses, not him taking over mine, but us working together as actual partners. My creativity and his experience, my modern approach and his traditional skills. I'd have complete creative control, and he'd handle the administrative side and teach me everything he knew about the business fundamentals. I was skeptical at first. The wounds were still fresh, and trust wasn't something I could just switch back on. But we started small. I took on a few of his old customers, showed them what was possible with a fresh approach. My dad watched as I transformed their boring repair jobs into opportunities for upgrades and customization. He saw their faces light up, saw them excited about cars again instead of just seeing vehicles as problems to fix. And slowly, he started to get it. We officially merged the businesses 8 months after his heart attack. We kept my garage because it had become the heart of the operation, but we incorporated his decades of reputation and his loyal customer base. I renamed it Legacy Customs and Repair as a nod to both our histories. The combination was explosive. Suddenly, we had the credibility of his 30-year reputation combined with the innovation and excitement of my custom work. We were getting corporate clients, collector car owners, and regular people who just wanted their daily driver to feel special. My dad started coming in every day, but in a different role. He wasn't the boss anymore, he was the mentor. He'd work alongside me and my team, sharing stories, teaching techniques, learning new approaches. The man who once threw a wrench at me was now patiently showing my young employees how to properly restore a classic carburetor. It was surreal and beautiful and healing all at once. Our relationship transformed from father-son hierarchy to genuine partnership. The business exploded. Within a year, we'd tripled our revenue. We expanded to a bigger location, hired 15 employees, and started getting featured in major automotive publications. We even got approached by a production company about doing a reality show, which we politely declined because we were too busy actually working. But the success wasn't even the best part. The best part was working alongside my dad and actually enjoying it, building something together that honored both our visions. We started a program training young people in custom automotive work, giving them the opportunities and encouragement I'd never gotten. My dad would teach them the fundamentals, the discipline, the respect for the craft. I'd teach them creativity, customer service, and how to see possibilities instead of just problems. We were creating the environment we both wished we'd had. Several of our trainees have gone on to start their own successful shops, and that makes us prouder than any amount of money. My dad's health improved dramatically. Having purpose, having a renewed relationship with me, being part of something exciting again, it gave him energy. He lost weight, started taking care of himself, seemed 10 years younger. My mom told me she hadn't seen him this happy since the early days of his original shop. He'd rediscovered his love for the work by letting go of control and embracing collaboration. It turned out that the legacy he really wanted wasn't me becoming him. It was us growing together. Looking back now, that wrench was the catalyst for everything good in my life. If he hadn't thrown it, if he hadn't given me that ultimatum, I might have stayed in that garage forever, slowly dying inside, resenting him more with each passing year. His moment of rage accidentally set me free. It forced me to prove myself, to discover my own capabilities, to build confidence I never knew I had. Sometimes the worst moments create the best outcomes. Last month, my dad and I restored a 1967 Mustang together. Not the same one from that terrible day, but the same model. We worked side by side, combining his traditional restoration skills with my custom modifications. When we fired up that engine for the first time and heard it roar to life, we both had tears in our eyes. That car represented everything: our conflict, our separation, our reunion, our collaboration. It was the perfect metaphor for our journey from broken relationship to reborn legacy. So that's my story. From a wrench flying at my head to building a business that matters, from being my father's disappointment to being his partner. The lesson isn't that parents should throw tools at their kids, obviously, but it is about knowing when to walk away from situations that are crushing you, even when it's terrifying. It's about betting on yourself when nobody else will. And it's about understanding that sometimes relationships need to completely break before they can be rebuilt into something stronger. If you're in a situation right now where someone's making you feel small, where you're living someone else's dream instead of your own, take this as your sign. You don't need permission to pursue what matters to you. You don't need approval from people who don't see your vision. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah, you might fail. But you know what's scarier? Waking up at 50 years old and realizing you never tried. My dad and I talk about that day sometimes now. He apologizes, I tell him to stop apologizing. Because honestly, as terrible as it was, it led us here. To a relationship built on respect instead of obligation. To a business that means something. To a life I'm actually excited to wake up to every morning. That dent in the wall at his old shop is still there. We kept it deliberately. It's a reminder that sometimes destruction precedes creation. Hit that subscribe button if this story resonated with you. Drop a comment telling me about a time you had to walk away from something to find yourself. And if you're struggling with a toxic situation right now, remember that you have more power than you think. The life you want is on the other side of the fear. Trust me, I threw it all away to find out, and I've never looked back. I'll see you in the next one.